We're all searching for it, or people. The ones you can call when you're at the end of your rope. The ones you ask for advice in a difficult stage or deciding on which jeans to buy. The ones who you share dreams and hopes with, who get you to the gym and love your kids like their own. Motherhood was never meant to be a solitary role, and now it doesn't need to be. Here we discuss everything from our favorite kidisms to mental
All right,
wellness
welcome to
to
the
our
Village
best mom hacks and
Podcast. I'm
more.
your host, Missy
Mamas are
Allred,
world
and
changers,
today I have a
and it's
special
time to stop
guest. I
bearing
have my
that
friend
responsibility
Alex with
alone.
me, and
So
she
whether
is
you're
my
driving
real
carpool,
life
rocking a
turned
sleeping baby, or doing
virtual
dishes,
turned
we're here
real
for
life
you.
again
Welcome to the
friend.
village.
Alex, I'm so excited to have you. Will you tell everybody a little bit about you and what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you today. So, I am the founder of a business called Mindful with Media, and I have a podcast by the same name, and I do coaching. And it originally started out about screen time and helping young moms be intentional both with their own screen time and also with their kids' screen time. But it's kind of morphing and changing, and I'll talk more a little bit about that later. Do you want me to kind of share like the journey of how I got
Yeah, please
here?
do.
Okay. So I used to spend a lot of time on my phone, like an embarrassing amount of time scrolling on my phone. And I saw things about like why you shouldn't do that. And like, I didn't want to be spending so much time on my phone, but I just did. Like, I just kept finding myself doom scrolling. And it just didn't feel good, just that like, I don't know, it just didn't feel good. And so I even got to a point where I was ready to delete all of my social media accounts and just be done with social media. And it was kind of around that time that I got a job working with missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Basically, I was helping them use social media to find people to teach about Jesus Christ because it was during COVID. And so they couldn't go outside like they used to. And so I learned a lot about social media marketing and just effective ways to use social media. But more than anything, during that time that I had that job, I just realized how good social media is and how much good can come from social media, especially when you have the right tools and the right boundaries to make sure that it's a tool that serves you instead of something that wastes your time or has all these negative side effects in your life. So that was kind of like why I decided to stay on social media and decided to start my own social media account all about being intentional with screens and social media in general. Um, yeah, that's why I'm here. That's why I started Mindful with Media initially.
I love it. And I know you've pivoted recently, and I want to talk more about that, but I'm curious your kind of your personal pivot of how did you go from just focusing on, okay, let's use screens intentionally to more the mindset behind why we are using screens. Does that make sense?
Totally, totally. As my journey to help young moms and really just women in general be intentional with screens, I started doing private coaching calls. And what I found in almost every single one of those calls is they would come to me about their screens and then we wouldn't talk about screens at all. Like it actually had nothing to do with the screens, like whatever thing they wanted to work on. It was, yeah, like a lot of mindset stuff, a lot of things with relationship with certain people or parenting challenges or struggles in their business or making money in their business or friendships, feeling lonely, they'd moved somewhere. It was like all of these other things that were going on in their life that were just either impacting their screen time or their screen time was impacting those things. And it was usually both. It usually went both directions. And so that's when I decided to pivot of like, I don't want to just help people with their screens because actually most people didn't even care about their screen time. Like even when I would talk with people, they kind of liked their screen time. Like they didn't really want to give it up. It was like, oh, I feel like I should, but like I don't want to. And so that's a lot of what we talk about in the coaching call is like, you don't have to give up your screen time. It's not even the screen time that's bad. I just want to help people to enjoy and embrace all the good that can come from screens without feeling like they control their life and just feel more of that inner peace and that calm and the just like the true fulfillment that comes from life that can all be impacted by our screens.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, tell me a little bit more about you said that their life was impacting their screen time and then vice versa, their screen time was impacting their life. How did you see that show up?
Okay, yeah. Things like, I mean, I think this is totally what you talk about, right? With like nervous system regulation. Like, for example, their kids they'd be having a really hard time with their kids. And like without even realizing it, they would turn to their phone as an escape, and then they would feel even more dysregulated. And so they yell at their kids, and then they would feel bad about that, and then they turn their phones. I mean, that's like a specific example of that, but that's, it's just kind of this cycle.
Have you seen that for yourself too, where you've seen your approach to your own screen time changing as you've noticed what's really at the heart of screen time for your clients too?
That is a really good question. And I think it actually started with me first,
Okay.
like when I first started Mindful with Media, I was so scared to talk about this because it was something that I was still struggling with. And so I was like, I kind of felt embarrassed to tell people that I was wasting time on my phone. Like that was really, I had a lot of shame around that. And so as I've been on this journey and figured it out, that's exactly what I've noticed is anytime that I am wasting time on my phone, or even when I don't even think I'm wasting time on my phone, like sometimes it's just turning to my phone when I used to think that wasn't that big of a deal. Now I notice like, oh, something must be going on. I must be avoiding something. And so then I can get to the root of it. So like as an example, a few weeks ago, I noticed that at the beginning of my work time, so when my daughter naps and when my son does quiet time, I have like a little bit of time. And typically I work during that time. But sometimes I kind of get housework done. It's kind of my like extra time. And I found that I would go to post on my Instagram stories during that time. And then I would spend more time on Instagram than I really wanted to. And so I was like, okay, wait, something's going on here. Like I really do get excited anytime I waste time on my phone. And waste time is such a an ambiguous term, but anytime I'm spending more time on my phone than I want to, I get excited because I'm like, oh, like something's going on here. My body's trying to communicate information to me and I can do something about this. And so what I realized during that time when I kept, going to post on my Instagram stories and spending too much time on Instagram is I didn't really have a clear plan of how I was going to spend that hour. And so now I just have made like a small change that every time before I post on my Instagram stories, I just have to pull out a sticky note and I just make a plan. I like brain dump things I want to do and then I just prioritize like the order of things I want to do. And so then I'm not like avoiding what I'm going to do next because I know exactly what I'm going to do next. So I can post on my stories and then I can do my next thing on my list instead of just like that buffer of like, I don't know how to spend my time. What's the best way to spend my time?
Yeah, I love that. I love that it's become this challenge for you almost of, oh, there's something going on here. Let's figure this out. I think that is actually maybe one of the most helpful emotions to try and feel is curiosity because it gets you,
Mm.
I was going to say out of your head, but really gets you into your head of actually sitting there and figuring out what's going on and why instead of I don't know, at least from my perspective, it seems like the biggest reason that people go to their screens is because they are trying to avoid something and it's so easy to just go and numb out.
Yes. Yes. I think that's so beautiful what you said about curiosity as one of the most helpful emotions and approaches because curiosity there's no shame or guilt with it, right? It's like, and I know you've talked about the difference between shame and guilt, which I think is important, but there's no, I guess, shame with curiosity. And that's actually like another really key thing, I think, in this whole process and journey is one, like letting go of the shame around it.
It keeps you there.
Like, yeah, exactly. The cycle just continues. But if you can realize that your brain is doing its job, like
Mhm.
you are designed to escape pain and to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And that's what your brain is supposed to do. And that's a really good thing in so many aspects of life. That's what helps you to eat when you're hungry. That's what helps you to sleep when you're tired, or if you're too hot, you're too cold. Like that's what helps you survive. And so that's the exact same thing that's happening when you turn to your phone. You're feeling something uncomfortable. And so your brain is like, oh, I know how to help you. Go on your phone. That's a really quick fix. And so I think just like thanking your brain, like, oh my gosh, my brain is doing such a good job of taking care of me. And this actually isn't really helping the situation. Like, this helps momentarily and temporarily, but it's not really a long-term fix. And so then you can kind of move past that and like go to the next step.
Yes, your brain is absolutely doing what it's supposed to. And I think that it's also okay to thank your brain and say, and let's learn something new. Let's rewire a little bit and have this not be our immediate response or our immediate pathway that our brain goes down. That's also what our brains are supposed to do, right? We're
Yes,
supposed to make new connections and learn and grow and expand. And just because that's the natural thing for our brain to do, and in a lot of ways it does keep us safe, that's not always the optimal, right? That
totally.
we want it to be different and we can. It doesn't just have to, that's the way our brain works. And so that's just the way it is. Our brain is incredible and can completely rewire itself. And I think it's really cool too that we can teach our brain in different circumstances because, like you said, it is so good that our brain does that because it keeps us safe and healthy and happy in very real, very real ways. But it also keeps us stuck in certain ways. And when we're talking about emotions in difficult circumstances and turning to our phones because it's easier to numb out, it's easier to just turn our brains off and go to social media than it is to sit and feel all the uncomfortable things that we really do need to
Yes.
feel and experience and and then be able to move on. And I think that's kind of the misconception with feeling our emotions is they do go away eventually. Like we're not sitting in it just to sit in it. We sit in it so that it can move through our body and actually move out and then we can move on. We need to move on. I just think
Yes.
that's such a it feels like it's going to last forever. We feel these uncomfortable things. We feel, I don't know, frustration or disappointment or a million other emotions and it feels like we're going to die or that it's just going to last forever and so it feels way safer to just push it down and ignore it. But eventually our body keeps track and eventually it comes back if we don't take the time to actually acknowledge and feel and move on.
Yes. And it's so interesting how I found that as I've, yeah, on this journey become a lot better at emotional regulation, you're actually able to solve the problem, instead of just, like you say, having that emotion just keep coming back again and again. Not that you don't have emotions anymore. Like, of course, you're always going to be a human and experience emotions, but that same emotion doesn't just keep coming back, stuff down, come back, stuff down, come back. Like you say, you move through it. And once you move through it, then you can solve the problem. Then you can find a solution. And that's really fun instead of just pacifying. I often relate it to the analogy of a baby who needs milk, where if the mom's gone, you can, for a little bit, you can give the baby a pacifier or binky and they'll soothe for a sec and then they'll realize it's not milk and then they want the milk again. You can do that for a little while, but eventually the baby really needs milk. Like that's what they actually need. And it's kind of the same. Like you can pacify that emotion for a little while, but eventually you're going to need the milk. You're really going to need to feed. I don't know, to
I love
process
that.
that
Well, and it's
emotion.
going to come back so much bigger, right? Like
Yeah.
with your baby example, I love that so much on so many levels. With that example, even it works there where when the baby starts crying because they're hungry, you give them the binky, like they're only kind of upset, right?
Yeah.
They're communicating, they're letting you know what's going on. But if you keep doing that over and over again without giving them what they actually need, they're going to explode and it's going to take a lot longer to calm them down. And it's just bigger
Yes.
and harder than it needed to be.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
it's the
exactly.
same thing with our emotions. You push it down and it adds up because it's building on top of each other. And eventually there's no place for it to go. And it's going to come out somehow. And I'm sure that's a huge part of how it affects our relationships, like back to life, like you were saying at the beginning with it's a cycle of turning to your screens and then that affecting life and then life affecting your screen time. It affects life because it builds up. And of course, if you have all this pent up emotion that explodes, it's not just going to affect you, it's going to, I think of like a volcano, it like literally sprays out and touches other people too.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. In how it impacts, yeah, your relationships with especially those who are close to you, whether that's your kids or your spouse or your close family members or friends.
Yeah. Tell me, what do you do either for yourself or with your clients? How do you move through these emotions once you realize, okay, screen time has been a buffer for me. This is what I've been using to avoid all the uncomfortable things that I'm not dealing with. How do you get to the place where you're not just noticing what's going on, like the habits and cycles that you go through, but also practicing the things you need to so that your screen time that doesn't have to be where you go. Like that's not your solution. Not that it really solves anything, but that's not your solution anymore.
Totally. Yeah, it's very individualized. That's also why I've really switched to one-on-one coaching is because it's so individualized. But a lot of what we'll do in coaching sessions is one, getting to the root of it. A lot of times they don't even know like what's going on. So it's really just like processing in that session of what's going on, just getting really clear on like why this matters to you. This is what I see over and over again is a lot of the women that I work with have unmet needs of having fun and resting. And so because they don't have enough time in their day, their brain is automatically like, well, I need rest or I need a break or I need a rejuvenation. And so that's when they turn to their phone. And so something huge that can help is just planning fun things and more rest and more relaxation and more rejuvenating things in your life. And it feels like you don't have time for it. You'll find that you do. Like you do actually have time for it. The
Especially
things
if you're
fit
not
in where they
spending
need
that
to.
time unintentionally scrolling.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And then
And I
there's not
think
so much.
too, I was just talking to my husband about this last night that I could be doing the same thing, but the intention completely matters in how much rest I feel. Where sometimes all I want to do is just sit and scroll through all the DIYers I follow. Like my personal account is like people I actually know and DIYers, and that's it.
I
And
love it.
sometimes that's all I want to do is I want to see what projects they were doing today. And if I intentionally get on to go see those projects, I can come out of that 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, and actually feel rested. But if I realize it's been 15 minutes and I just don't even know what happened with that time because I unintentionally just started scrolling, it is not restful at all. It's like the opposite of that. And isn't that so
Yes.
crazy that that intention 100% matters?
That is a perfect example of that. And so that's, yeah, another huge thing that can be helpful is planning time to get on social media. Like literally schedule it in your day. This is my time. I go on social media and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to, yeah, soak up that time of looking at the DIYers. And it also reminds me of something that I always butcher his name and I talk about him all the time, but near Isle, I really don't know how to pronounce his last name. But he wrote a book called Indistractable, and he talks about this concept of something's only distracting if it's distracting you from something. And I think he says it much more eloquently.
Oh,
But he um he gives like, yeah, that example of if you want to be playing with your kids and you're distracted by an email, then that's a distraction. But if you want to be at work looking at your emails and your kids are, distracting you, then your kid's the distraction. Like just
yeah.
just coming back to that idea of like, well, what do you want to be doing? And then those other things are distracting you. It's not the thing itself.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so first you talked about finding the root. How do you go about doing that? Often, like if this isn't something you're used to, it's really easy to just go, I have no idea, and I have no idea where to start. So where could somebody start?
Everybody processes things differently.
Of
And
course.
so journaling can be huge, just dumping out like what you're feeling. Some people are more verbal, so that's like why talking can be really helpful of just like talking out loud to someone, processing. Um, I think those are my biggest ways are like writing or talking. But yeah, as far as like questions to ask yourself, what am I feeling? Why might I be feeling this? What's going on that could cause me to feel this? Are there any relationships that are feeling stressful or yeah, because sometimes you really don't even know. And often, I simplify this when I teach this, but it's so much more complex than like I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's usually like I'm feeling a little bit excited and a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit sad. And it's usually a lot more complex than just like one emotion that you're feeling.
Well, and
And so I
probably
think
not just
also,
one moment either. Where it's
yes.
like, for example, right now I'm noticing we're kind of in a very stressful time right now. And I've noticed myself turning to my phone so often because I'm so stressed out all the time and so dysregulated. But it's not even that necessarily like that situation that's pushing me to my phone. It's like, and my kids are being super loud, and that's like the thing that throws it over the edge. And now I just need to escape. And that's what I go to where, yes, it was my kids, not my kids, it was the noise, a lot of loud noise. I get super dysregulated. I totally know that. And so that's me not taking the time to make sure I'm taking care of myself and regulate my nervous system. But deeper than that, there's this really big thing going on in my life. Like, of course I'm stressed. Of course I am.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that doesn't need to bleed into every part of my day.
That is a perfect example of, yeah, how it's so much more complex. And so for that, I would really focus on that like deeper thing that's causing you a lot of stress rather than like the momentary things with your kids. It's like I would go deep first and then come back up to like the more everyday things.
I love that. How have you seen this change things for you? What is different, especially since you got more into like the deeper thinking, bigger picture, getting to the root of things work?
Yes, I am a different person. And that sounds dramatic and it sounds cheesy, but it's true. Like, I feel so calm and so peaceful and so happy. I used to be so easily triggered. I don't know. I would say that just like in my response, like, I've never been a yeller. I've never been one to like explode that way, but I would like break down or shut down. Like, that's more of my, natural response. And I feel like I just used to do that all the time. Or I'd have dreams where I was just screaming at people. Like just
Like something you wanted to do, but instead you shut
yeah.
down. And so it was like that. Okay,
Yeah.
I have to pause you just for a second because I think
Yeah.
this is so interesting. Because if you have heard me talk about your nervous system, you get triggered and you go into the simplified version is fight or flight.
Mm,
But it's fight, flight, freeze, which is where you shut down, or fawn, which is when you start to pacify your own needs and very much become a martyr. And it's so interesting talking to other people where my response is either fawn or fight, depending on who
Okay.
it's with. If it's with my kids, I go fight. If it's with pretty much anybody else, I go fawn. So it's really interesting talking to you where it seems like you go more on like the freeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, more on the freeze side. But it's the same thing. The response is different, but it's your nervous system saying, we're not safe, and it's just trying to keep you safe. And
Exactly.
in these kind of situations, it's not actually helping. And like that's the difference where like if your kid is hurt, like a couple years ago, my oldest son shoved my middle son's finger in the door, and it like, anyways, it was a whole thing. It like took his pinky off, basically. It
Oh
was
my
really bad.
gosh.
And in that moment, my husband and I were just go immediately, right? Because in
Mm,
that moment, you couldn't sit there and go, oh my goodness, what do I do? Like you have to, that's when your nervous system kicks in and it keeps you safe. It keeps your kids safe. And you just immediately
yeah.
act, right? You went into basically it's fight, you're fighting for your kid, right? It's so
Yes.
good. But when it's most of the safety issues that we come across with on a daily basis are more of these like mental and emotional safety where it's just uncomfortable. And it's just so interesting to see the different ways that people respond. It's so
Yes.
interesting, but it's all your nervous system saying, I'm not safe, I'm dysregulated, I need help.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's so interesting. Kind of coming back to what you were saying, where maybe my response from the outside looks the same to most people because of my, natural response. But I feel this inner calm. I feel like I know what to do when I do feel emotions, and it's my go-to response. Like before, my go-to response was turn to my phone or just like feel anxious, just like my body triggered. But I feel like my go-to response is like, okay, what's going on here? I need to regulate and then I can solve this problem. And like I feel like my relationship with my kids is so much different because of that. I am better at setting boundaries with them. I'm better at setting boundaries with other people. I spend way more fun time with my husband and with my kids. I think I used to feel a lot of guilt around that, but now I love my life. Like I genuinely love the life that I live.
I love it. And it that really is such a good reflection of you where you are such a, I don't know, every time I'm with you, I just feel so much more like calm. Like I seriously just feel like I could just take a deep breath. And
Oh,
I think a lot my natural response a lot of times is hurried, almost frenzied. And every time I'm with you, I just feel everything slow down. And I
oh,
just you are a testament to that. Where like I see that so much in you where you really have done that work to get to that place and that is just who you are. And isn't that so cool that our brains can completely rewire where that is your natural response now is what's going on? Let's get to the root of this. Let's feel all the things and then we can move on honestly a lot quicker than if we had avoided and pushed things down. And I think that's such an interesting part about this whole thing is sometimes we think I don't have time to sit and feel all of this.
yeah.
But really it takes way more time to avoid it than it would be to just sit, feel it, understand it, and move on with our day. Like emotions only stay in our body for 90 seconds at a time.
Hmm. It feels so uncomfortable. Like in that moment, it feels like so much longer than 90 seconds,
Oh,
It's like
yes.
just, yeah, that discomfort. But yeah, just like stop when you can stop resisting it. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned is like as soon as I notice that I'm resisting something, it's just like surrendering it and like, okay, I'm feeling this. Yes, it's still painful, but it's not as intensely painful.
Mm. And I think part of the reason for that is you're not shoving it down, so it's not layers that you're feeling that are, of course,
Mm,
that's going to be more intense. But I also think that with those layers comes multiple emotions that are layered on top of each other, which just makes things a little bit more intense. Like, for example, we talked a little bit about shame. Shame is always in response to some other thing that we're thinking and feeling. And so not only do we have to process this disappointment or, whatever it is, but we also have this layer of shame built on top of it, which is
yeah.
a harder one to, like, that one takes more effort to move through. So not only do we have this
Yes.
already uncomfortable emotion, we have an even harder one on top of it.
Yes. That's so interesting that you say that because that is one of the biggest things that I've worked on with clients in coaching calls is expecting and embracing mistakes. I think when you're regulated, like when you're in a good place, it's so easy to say, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to handle my phone use. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to regulate my emotions. And then as soon as you get in that dysregulated state or you're feeling some really strong emotion, it is so much harder. Or even like just life happens, it's like your kids don't sleep or you're really sick or I don't know, something traumatic happens. It's so much harder in that moment to actually stick to what you originally said you were going to do.
Yeah.
And so if you can anticipate that and just expect that things aren't going to go as planned, then you don't have to have so much shame around whatever happens. It's just like, oh, yeah, that wasn't part of my plan. Okay, I'm going to not do that anymore. I don't know, just like letting go of the shame and embracing that you're not going to be perfect is huge.
Yeah. I think something I was actually thinking about today because all three of my kids are sick, and truthfully, my entire plan for the day, like this is the only thing that happened today that I had planned on. Everything else, my entire day completely went out the window or changed times, like nothing stayed the way I had planned it out, except for this.
Totally.
And even this started out a little crazy with
Yeah.
babies awake and stuff. But I I started the day kind of feeling sorry for myself of like,
Mm,
oh, I planned this whole thing out and nothing's going according to plan. And oh, that just doesn't feel good. And so I decided to flip it. And I just was thinking, and I'm consciously choosing to like to have my day be different. My day did
mm.
not go according to plan, and I'm choosing to let it be that way. I'm choosing a different plan. And I mean, it's 4 o'clock right now, and I still haven't posted any of the things that I had planned on posting on my page. And I'll get to it eventually, but I'm just sitting here going, and I chose something different. That was a higher priority today, and that's okay. And I think
That is
that
so
helps
cool.
where it's just so easy to fall into that victim mentality of life is happening to me versus I'm consciously choosing my life and how I respond to things. I could have still done the things that were on my list today, but that I knew that wasn't the right choice for my kids' health, for dealing with sick kids, and just owning that choice of like, yeah, I chose something different today and it wasn't according to plan, and that's okay.
That is so awesome. I love that story. And I think I was actually just talking about this with some family, just that idea of being a victim and how I think our generation is, like I think we are a lot better at like recognizing emotions and recognizing how trauma impacts people and how things that what parents do or say impacts you. And so I think as part of that, like we're better at working through things and better at like processing things instead of just shoving them down. But also, it's easy to fall into becoming a victim of, oh, well, my parents did this or this person did this, or yeah, just becoming a victim of your circumstances. And so I think you have such a beautiful approach that's this like this healthy balance of allowing yourself to process and allowing yourself to accept that things aren't perfect, whether that's your day or something deeper of, trauma you've gone through or something, like allowing that and allowing yourself to process and choosing not to be a victim. I think,
Mm.
anyways, that was off topic, but I think that's so beautiful
Uh,
that you have that
I
approach.
I love that. Well, thank you. That means a lot. But I totally agree. And I think we could do like a whole podcast episode just on victim mentality because that's a whole thing. But is there anything else that you want people to know? Just any last minute thoughts where you're like, I could preach it from the rooftops. Everybody needs to know.
Yeah. This is not what I was going to say, but this is coming to mind right now of just having reactionary tactics and having preventative tactics. I think
Mm,
having things that your go-to in the moment, like when your day didn't go as planned, when your kids are sick, when you're feeling really tired or really stressed about something, just have your go-to reactionary things that you're going to do to help you process, and then also have your preventative tactics. So if you notice that, like as an example, I mean that example I shared earlier of like I was wasting time on my phone at the start of every workday, or like several months ago, I realized like every day around 4 p.m., I was checking how many views my reels had. And like, I was like, okay, something's going on here. And so then I started doing more crockpot meals, and I started doing a meal swap, and I started doing, um, like going on a walk right before the nights when I did make dinner. I don't know. And this is a lot of what you teach with like nervous system regulation, but like, yeah, implementing, having your go-to reactionary tactics, and then if you notice a recurring problem, implement a preventative tactic. And then my last one final thing, this is my like shout it from the rooftop thing, is plan more time to be still in your life.
mm,
And that can
yeah.
be still having fun, or that can be still just sitting doing nothing. But like, turn off this podcast and just like let your mind be quiet for a few minutes. I think that's something that is really hard and really uncomfortable, but it's powerful when you do it.
Yes. I don't think we are a generation that is good at being bored. And like
Exactly.
stillness, like that's where the magic happens. Absolutely. And I think that's why having journaling and even just these reactionary and preventative tactics, like you said, is so helpful because those have to happen in stillness, not
Mm,
necessarily quiet, but stillness. And I just love
yes.
that so much. That was so great. Thank you so much, Alex. All right, where can people find you, connect with you, work with you?
Totally. Yeah. So the best way to find me is on Mindful with Media on Instagram, or you can listen to my podcast, also called Mindful with Media, on any podcasting platform. And if you follow me on Instagram or you're on my email list, then you'll always be up to date on how to work with me. I'm opening up some new private coaching spots. So keep your eye out for that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for talking with me today, Alex.
Yeah, thanks so much, Missy. This was so fun.
Thanks for joining me on this week's episode. I would love to hear your thoughts on it, so message me on Instagram at the Missy Allred. There is always room in our village, so if you enjoyed it, will you please send it to a friend or leave a rating and review? Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you for being here. I'll talk to you next week.